Dr. Pelumi was saying there, is that understanding what exactly does discipline mean in of itself. Now, if you look into it, and I did do this because, again, running the parenting courses and stuff like that, I went and had a search. What does it actually mean to discipline? And in the original Greek, it means to disciple.
Exactly.
So if we're talking about discipline, we're talking about
Discipleship.
teaching.
Yeah, teaching, yeah.
So if we take that word in of itself and turn it around and say it's not about punitive action, but it's about teaching, then what am I teaching?
That's it.
That's
And that was...
Hello, welcome back to Margaret's podcast. We are here again to talk about the topics that impact on us, our communities. We make ourselves vulnerable through the stories we tell, and we want you to be a part of that. We are not here to say whether we're right or wrong, but we're just having a conversation. And we believe that through the stories we tell, it will resonate, it will transform, and it actually will change somebody's life. We hope so anyway. So let's welcome our team back. So we've got Caleb here. We've got Pelumi.
Hello.
We've got Elliot.
Hi.
And we've got Stephen. And I am your host, Margaret. So we're going to be talking about a topic. We're following up from what we spoke about the last time about peer pressure. But we want to lead on to something else about discipline. What does it mean to discipline? What are the areas of discipline? What has been the impact of discipline? Are we doing it the right way? And how does that relate to even the society and the system that we bring up our children in, or where we have brought up? Where are we now? Has it helped us? This is what we want to look at today. So welcome to this day's podcast. So let's go. What is it what's discipline to you?
Discipline to me, because I'm not a parent, so I guess from the other receiving end,
You didn't like it.
no, I didn't like it, but I thought that it's just a tool to put things in place, to put structure. It's supposed to shape you for the world. I guess there's pros and cons of discipline. I feel like it can be extreme.
I suppose it's the way it's been done, isn't it?
Yeah, I feel like when emotions put into discipline, it can get out of hand. But if you act on it on a way of like, it's just like, like when you're dealing with business, you don't get emotional. It's all about the principles. If you act on discipline in that approach, I feel like it will be a lot better than when you're acting on emotions and you can't really control how far you may take it. So
I think you're right. You're right. But unfortunately, emotion does get into it. And remember, we've been talking before about things that happen to us as children. Maybe our parents went through one trauma, and because they don't really want to do that, but when there needs to be an outlet, and then sometimes it's the child that is there that can bear the brunt of that, and that can be very painful.
But I feel like as human beings, we've all got to take responsibilities for our emotions and how we feel, parent or not.
Yeah.
I'm at the point in my life where I'm dealing with my traumas. So when I've got kids, that's not going to be my excuse to take it out on them, because first of all, they didn't choose to be here. Second of all, I'm an adult. I'm ahead of them. I have no more than them. I need to take responsibility for my actions. It's not an excuse. And you're just going to continue the cycle and the cycle. And it's like, I guess when our parents or older people are in a certain place and they didn't like the treatment they got from their parents. So you don't want to become something you hate as well.
But that's what happens, unfortunately. Yeah. It happens.
100%.
It's so sad, but it does happen. It's like we keep on repeating the same thing, and we keep on saying we don't want to do that, but we do. Pelumi?
As Caleb said, I'm not a parent. I'm not a parent, but then I think it's also, from a behavioral point of view, discipline is a form of behavioral training, right? It's a form of training and putting structure in place, like you said. But it doesn't have to be a bad thing. And I think with our generation, we have the language, and in terms of trauma.
Oh, you have the language.
And all of that. And
You have the language.
which is really powerful. But then it's also, as Caleb said, okay, making a choice to break that cycle and to come face to face with our traumas and things emotionally, so that when we do, by God's grace, come to the point of being a parent, you're aware of the different types of discipline, the different modes of discipline, again, balancing it with whoever your partner is, the different approaches depending on the child. But at the end of the day, it's shaping the child and putting, like you said, structure in place in terms of the adult you are raising. I now have that like sort of lens in terms of when you are raising a child, you have in mind the adult you're raising and the world that they will encounter, because the world they will encounter is very different from the world you have grown up in. But as long as you equip them with the necessary tools in terms of the principles, the principles, the like characteristics, the different things you want them to have that is representative of the household they come from, I think that is discipline. And it doesn't have to be a bad thing, although the child encountering it may feel like,
It's a bad thing.
gosh, it's a bad thing. But if you also back it up with, this is why I'm doing this. It's not because I hate you or anything like that, which is where some of like the emotional outlet and using children as like a emotional punching bag and stuff.
So
yeah.
let's hear from the parents then. So you're not parents, so you're just telling us. So parents, what do you have to say?
Come on, baby, no. No, it's true. The thing is,
And be real now, because
last time we were speaking about emotional intelligence, and I was sharing that I was listening to a man. His name is Apostle Femi Lazarus. Sorry, it's not that I'm just piping this guy's name, but he speaks to the soul, and he was sharing that, you know, a lot of us that are parents now, adults as parents, we have a traumatized child within us. And that child, I mean, discipline is not supposed to be traumatic. Transformational, yes, to help you understand and build and develop, to learn better. And as you've both shared, Pilume and you, that explanation, that understanding of why that discipline had to be exacted at that time and at that place is important, because it informs, it then builds better understanding, and then is more likely to deter behavior of the same later on. But our parents, man, I still remember pots banging on my head. You know, when I was talking, I remember I was in the kitchen one day too. I don't know what my mum said, and I replied. I didn't think it was a reply that was wrong, but obviously, and then I heard ding on my head, and I was like, and I was like, before I could ask, was that a pot? I got it again. I got it again. And you know, back in our day, our parents would just use anything.
They will use anything. They will use their hand. They will use everything.
Yeah. And you know, or you'd find them repeating certain things that their spouses would have said to them when they were, you know, in situations, domestic violence situations, you know, and all these things. You know, it's only with maturity and wisdom that you come to realize that, that's not the way you treat anybody. Do you understand what I'm saying? Talk less of your own child. I mean, even recently, you know, my child did something that she wasn't supposed to do. I levied a punishment, discussing it with her dad, and but then at the same time, because she had breached trust, I thought she was still doing something else. But when I found that she didn't, I actually cut the punishment short, and I said to her and explained to her that, listen, because of the fact that you breached trust with me in this particular activity, I then was a bit suspicious now in this next activity. But when I actually found out that you were sincerely honest, then I said, no, you know, I'm going to cut this punishment short. You're going to get this back. Do you understand what I'm saying? And for me, and I explain, and because I took the time to explain to her, and hopefully she's understood, you know, for me, it makes a difference. It's something that is embedded in the memory. I didn't have to traumatize her with the event. It's just building that understanding.
Okay, you see, I hear you guys, and I'm
not saying I was always like that.
Yeah, because the truth is, we can say it's the theory how it is, but in practical sense, we know that it doesn't always pan out like that, and that's what I really want us to think about. But before we go into that, Stephen,
you see, every time I hear that word discipline, it really ignites something in me, and it has been transformational for me because you and any other adult our age group and above will understand when you hear the word discipline. What's the first thing that comes to your mind? It's punitive action.
Punitive. That's it.
Punitive action.
And it doesn't have to be like that.
It's a hit.
Yeah.
So, but part of my re-education, like Dr. Bellumi was saying there, is that understanding what exactly does discipline mean in of itself. Now, if you look into it, and I did do this because, again, running the parenting courses and stuff like that, I went and had a search. What does it actually mean to discipline? And in the original Greek, it means to disciple.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about discipline, we're talking about
discipleship.
teaching.
Yeah, teaching. Yeah.
So if we take that word in of itself and turn it around and say it's not about punitive action, but it's about teaching, then what am I teaching?
That's it.
That's
and that was my mind shift. That look, like what you guys have said, the first thing you think about is correction. How about education before correction? And what did we put in place to change the landscape before we went down the route of discipline? Did we give the appropriate guidelines as per why we came to this action? And like you said there, Caleb, the emotional aspect, I don't think you can take emotion away from any kind of discipline, but it's about, is that emotion controlled?
In fact, this is so good, So, the last, the previous podcast when Devlin was talking about taking football, you said because you did this, you're not gonna play football for a year, and what does that do?
Yeah.
Does it achieve? Does it accomplish? And that's the mistake. Yeah. But that's even going a bit high. But even taking, some people say, okay, I can't smack you, but at least I can take your phone away. So where is the balance? That's what I want to know. What is the balance? So, do I take their phone away, or you don't get pocket money for a week? Go on.
I think, just like you said about explaining and understanding, because kids want to understand why. When you're with a little toddler, they're asking, why is this? What is this? What is that?
Curiosity.
The curiosity. They need to understand what they're doing, and they need to understand the importance of what this will cause and what can happen. And I feel like it's just being honest. Sometimes we underestimate how smart kids can be.
Oh, yes, yeah.
You can underestimate how smart kids can be. Just because they might be young, smaller, doesn't mean they're not sharp in their brain. So I feel like when you treat a kid like a kid,
I actually don't even like that word kid. I don't. It's like a ghost.
That's what I mean. That's why I did
and when you're calling them kids, then they're just gonna
they live like kids. Yeah.
I feel like we have to give them that opportunity to give them the chance to kind of show their maturity and their understanding. But just like you said, just explaining it. Sometimes some things need to be taken from kids because, to teach a lesson. Not everything's going to go your way, but once that's done, and make them understand, because I've been in a position where I've worked with young people as well, and it's like I've had to be in a position where I've had to tell them, this is the reason why this has happened. This is why I've had to do this, because you've acted like this. Do you think what you did was right? This is what it's caused. And you also need to, sometimes kids are living in the moment, and I feel like, let me not even use, young people are living in the moment. And to be fair, like adding to your point, I feel like adults take it to that point where they're just living in the moment, where they're not even able to educate themselves.
Living in the moment, wow.
Or take a break to understand, what am I actually doing?
Yes.
Why am I doing this? Yes. Where did I learn this from? Why am I taking this route?
They lose
Right.
the curiosity of the child.
Yeah, they don't, and it's like you said, that trauma of that inner child, they haven't settled it. So it's like that, just living in the moment, doing certain things when you actually sit down and let them sit down for like a minute or 30 minutes and actually reflect on all their actions. Why am I telling my kid to do, my child to do this? And when you actually think about it, is it really worth it? You know what I mean? So
Go on.
Because that then comes down to, again, we're talking about this thing of discipline. Is the punishment, if we're correcting something that's not right or something that we feel is not appropriate, is the punishment appropriate to the punishment?
Yes.
I mean,
It's the behavior.
The behavior.
behavior.
The punishment, yeah. Is it appropriate to the behavior? Because sometimes we can go overboard.
Yeah.
And sometimes that comes from our own trauma as well. Because I remember being beaten badly because, and it wasn't, what I did was so small, but because my mom was going through so much, she just did it. It just went out like that. And I said, well, what did I do? And that kind of thing. So that behavior, my behavior, and sometimes that brings out the worst in you. You might feel that,
Definitely.
what did I do wrong now? And then you're doing, and yeah, that rebellious thing had to, yeah.
And then when we've then done it, because been there, done that, you know, and that level of supposed discipline in quotes, where do we then stop when the emotion is running
brought
super
so-
duper
yeah.
high? You know, we've been beaten sometimes to the point that by the time your parents is finished beating you, they're huffing and puffing like they've done a marathon. You know, is that what we're trying to inculcate? What are we trying to teach in that process? That methodology is right, but it's completely counterproductive.
I just want to jump in. I feel like I'm caveating everything with I'm not parent.
It doesn't matter.
But it's a thing of like, even in that, okay, we have the theory, in the moment it might be different, but it's also allowing us, acknowledging our humanity, that mistakes will be made, that maybe things that we think we've dealt with in terms on a trauma point of view may come up again, or like may come up in discipline in children, but then acknowledging that, okay, I've made a mistake here, and taking time to reflect, and then also in a way self-disciplining. It's like, okay, what choice am I making to break the cycle if I think I've gone overboard? I love what you said about when you disciplined your daughter and it was a breach of trust, so it made you suspicious in another activity, but when you found out that, okay, she was actually being sincere and honest, you then adjusted the punishment and you shortened it. Now, when we think about discipline and it being education and it being like, what am I teaching? That taught her grace. That taught her, I see you have the ability to change and adjust. That taught her you can rebuild trust. That taught her emotional regulation. That's also modeling a healthy way of resolving conflict within relationships you care about. So when we think about discipline in a holistic way, in terms of what am I modeling for my child to handle future relationships, I'm not even just talking romantically, in friendships, in the workplace. Am I teaching my child that the appropriate response to someone breaching trust or breaching a personal boundary is to erupt in anger, and then they carry that into the workplace, or they carry that into the place of worship, or they carry that into another relationship, and you're wondering, why are we raising people who are just explosive? Have you taught them through your discipline and how you've modeled things in relationships how to properly regulate their emotions?
I think that's where the learning for parents as well as carers comes in, because like we said, there's a lot of baggage that's being carried along, and before that can actually, it's going to take time. And we've got to acknowledge that there's a point you raised about self-discipline. If we're not humble enough to say, actually, I messed up.
Yeah,
some of us come from that culture whereby we don't even know how to say sorry.
African pride.
Okay, I disciplined you in a way that I punished you in a way that wasn't appropriate. Sorry, I messed up there. I do apologize.
Absolutely.
Do we get there? Absolutely. No, we just want to, as an African parent, to say, nah.
Me apologize.
Apologize. No.
But it's back to that point I said about just doing what you've been shown, and to give grace, like, I'm just someone that's quite a deep thinker, and I'm just gonna let my thoughts go. The way I see it is that obviously platforms like this is showing the change, and we've got to remember that I'm first generation, you're first generation, and it's like probably our great grandparents were just fresh from slavery, and it's like they haven't had a break.
No.
So it's like 2, 3, 4 generations of doing the same thing, and it's come to us now where we've actually taken a hold and saying, is this actually correct? So it's just like, on the other flip of things, is that it's understandable why your parents or our grandparents did that, because it's all they ever knew.
All they ever knew.
And it's not like now where we're living in a time where there's so much information. So if you don't actually want to change,
Then
there's
there's
a problem.
There's a problem.
20, 30 years, there's no information. You've just got textbook, newspaper, and it's controlled. Whereas now you've got TikTok where it's not really controlled and the truth is coming out. So on the other side, that's where there's grace as to why those type of behaviors or discipline was.
Can I take it up a notch a bit? About talking about the systems as well, because I go back to that episode when we looked at the system, especially when a child is used to something being taken away from him, you're reinforcing how he feels. So if that child now gets if that's the way it is, you're going to take away my rights as a young person. I do this, you take away my rights. And what does that do? What does that mean to you when you don't have rights anymore, or I'm supposed to have my rights, but it's taken away?
I guess naturally you just want to take things into your own hands.
Exactly.
Take things into your own hands and make your life custom to whatever feels right to you. And that's what made it.
If the system isn't for me, why do I need to?
100%.
And the system is only doing what my parents did, because you were mentioning a point about the system mirroring because social media has brought it out now.
Yes. The system mirroring what parents, families do to each other.
Yeah, and the system's doing the same.
Yeah, it does. It builds frustration, because as a child, when you're going into the system, the first system any child will enter into is the school system
After the
parents. Do you understand? And depending on how you're raised, you're raised to some extent understanding that there are trusted adults that know right from wrong, that will do good, know good from bad. And then you go into the school system and you're seeing the supposed teachers maybe being allies with the bullies, maybe not doing the right things, taking away your rights when you should have a right. You know within yourself you have a right to do whatever it is, but they're taking that away. That builds frustration. And then on top of that, they have that punitive attitude where, you've not done this according to their understanding, and so you're going to get that. This is what's going to happen to you. This is what's going to happen. And over time, the child disengages.
Okay.
Not just disengages at home, but disengages with the system. And then that's where you have that school to prison pipeline. You're just keep frustrating till they just flip. And there is no, and that sense of thinking that you're doing right by, if I contain you, if I stop you from doing this now without any explanation, without any understanding, then I will get a better you.
It doesn't work
it's
like
far
that.
from reality.
And that takes me to the story I think I said before we came onto this, about the young boy that is suing his parents. The young boy that was his parents sent him to Nigeria because they wanted to stop him from getting involved in gangs. That there was a potential issue of being groomed. And they sent him to Nigeria, and he complained. He got so people were saying that, does he not? It's just 14, but he I think he knows what he's doing. I don't know. You guys might know better, because I don't know why he would want to do that. As my typical African head was like, why you're taking me to court? No, but I don't know. But he's saying that he's been maltreated in Nigeria. He's not been, doesn't eat well, and he's not been in gangs. But the school system. So where's the right of the parent there? Where's the right of the child? What's the balance there in that terms of, because he sees it as punishment. They're seeing it as they want to protect him.
Yeah.
I thought we've had this conversation when I was at one of your sessions, and he said the culture that the parent needs to understand the culture that their child is growing up in.
Yeah.
And if parents end up doing things like that, even though they're coming from a good place and they want to protect their child, the system that you're living in, your child knows its rights, and the system can build your child against you. If your child is really listens and takes into what they're saying, like, the system is not here to it's not built to make the teachers and the parents work together to help bring up the child. It's like conflicts of interest, especially if the culture is different.
Yes.
So the parent thinks they're doing the right thing, and like I said, this is their first time probably raising up a boy in this country.
Yes.
They don't understand what it's like to walk in his shoes, but it's like it's like a saying, old tricks with a new dog.
Yeah.
Not saying that the kid is that, but you have to be up to date with what's really going on, and that's why I said that a community, I feel that community is important, just having that kind of like, not pride, not to just feel that you're the parent, I can do it by myself. People that, have been in your shoes before, that might be older, that have raised kids, and asking them, what do I need to do?
Being humble enough to ask, because some people just want to like protect and keep that secret that everything is fine at home.
It's difficult though, because as you said, there is a significant conflict of interest. There are parents, as we saw with that child who was groomed at the age of 6 and eventually died, where they are telling the system, listen, my child is in trouble, what can I do? And they're not getting the sound advice. And the community probably would have been telling that parent, carry him home, send him home, because if the police catch him, do you understand what I'm saying? And that fear and that panic, that lack of understanding, because the thing is as well, when we don't understand things, that's when we are more in panic mode and looking at things from an emotional perspective, because we just don't understand. But of course, not really knowing the full in and outs of that parent's situation and that child, it's very difficult, because if you try to tell the child before they left that, listen, I'm worried about your safety, and I think, before you go down this road, it's best you go here. They may not see them to take them there the following day.
They'll disappear.
And then maybe, when you get to, perhaps when they arrived at Nigeria, it was a time to have the discussion that, listen, I actually got you a one-way ticket. I'm fearful of ABC, and this is why I'm bringing you here. But also, we always assume that because we put our children with family back home, they're safe. No, they're not. You haven't done your due diligence. Do you understand what I'm saying? You haven't checked that.
And you can't just keep on sending money home.
Yes. Safe. Yeah. Sending money home with your child is not the best thing if you're not present. Do you understand? Or you haven't ensured that the person that is going to be their guardian is present. Because many times you hear that you think that you send them off, and then the uncle that you sent them with is beating them, doing all sorts of,
and I think that's what this
because of jealousy and because of all sorts of things. So it's a very difficult thing.
Just following on from what you're saying there, because if we backtrack, we got to think about before they made that decision to send this child home, what was the relationship like? prior to
Exactly.
that? Because we don't know about any
Well,
of that.
I think some of the things I found out was that the child was misbehaving at home. He was getting into trouble. He was coming late to school, and I think the teachers raised the issue with the parents. And I think the parents did. I think he had a very not too good of a relationship with his dad, so they just thought the best thing to do, and they started seeing things, maybe the knife, the pictures. Although he denied it, that he's a good boy, he's polite. They took this away from him. They didn't want him to play football, and then that was the best thing because it was getting out of hand.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the best way they thought. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they, and I like what you said there, that's the best way they thought. But where the actual relationship with the child is the paramount thing that I'm trying to hammer on. How were they? Were they even listening to what the child was saying in the moment? Mum, I'm telling you this is not true. Mum, what evidence do you have? Dad, what are you saying? Listen to what I'm saying. And, what were they paying attention to what was actually going on? And did they have that communication line, that proper communication line open with the school to be able to establish, and then go into Nigeria, like you said there? Is that then the solution? Personally, when I went to Nigeria with my parents, I'm telling you, now I don't care what anybody says, I would never be an advocate for you to send your children to a place where you are not.
When you're not yourself.
Exactly.
100% against it. Because if we're finding it difficult where we are with them, how on earth is somebody else going to do what we're supposed to do?
Yeah.
That's my take on that.
I agree.
The point that keeps ringing in my head is what you said about the system that the child first interacts with being the school. And you heard me say the family because the family is the first unit, right? And it's what are you teaching them in that first unit in terms of their voice being heard, in terms of, there's just a lot with, I just have a passion for family. What we're teaching.
I agree, because you might even be modeling, and then you're teaching that child well, but when that child now hits a system,
another system.
Yes, and that it's like, it can be frustrating for that child.
Do they interact or step into the school system with a confidence knowing that my voice will be heard? Because even that situation you've presented in terms of the 14-year-old boy, the parents immediately took the side of the teachers. And of course, it's wise to listen to teachers. I have friends who are teachers, all of that stuff. But taking time to actually listen to the child and understand different perspectives instead of just viewing the information through one lens. And what you said about community, Caleb, that's why it's also important to have communities like, okay, have you considered it from this angle? The fact that the child even went along the lines of suing the parents tells me that the child is actually more switched on and actually engaging in.
He's got his lawyer and everything.
That even shows that, like you said, the relationship that they must have with the parents, because for you to not care and actually, want to sue your parents, it just shows the breakdown. There's a breakdown of relation, and it's just, like you said, the kid is switched on, the kid is smart. And it's just, I feel like you need to understand your kids, and you can't, going back to that point on discipline, you can't discipline each kid the same. Every kid is different, every kid works differently, and you need to understand how to connect with that kid, how to understand that kid.
And it's difficult. It is. If you're constantly working, and especially because I grew up in a single parent family, and they're always saying, "I'm doing it for the children. I'm doing it," but you're not present for the child. You're not there for the child. The child is there for themselves. And yes, you come home, but you're still not making that quality time. Then that relationship is not building. And, I know with all of my children, my stepchildren and my daughter, I would never, ever believe a teacher over them, ever, because I knew what that was like. And as far as I'm concerned, I have to hear the voice of my child. And the only time I would believe you as a teacher is if what you said matched the behavior I understand him or her to have, you know. But it's about having a balance. But when you don't even have the relationship, it's difficult for you to. But as I said, you know, in a church community, because we talk about community, and most people, you know, it may be church or a mosque. They'll be like, listen, send them home. That's what so-and-so did, and it worked out very well.
Every child is different.
But every child is different.
And every community they're going back to is different.
Yeah.
So
Just jumping quickly in terms of that school point, I think it's also us realizing that we can work with the schools.
yes, we can.
Work with the system instead of being because a lot of people from our community are now going into those systems, right, and becoming teachers. So it's a thing of collaborating. Like you were saying, the behavior I see doesn't match up with what you're saying. So how can we work together instead of the teacher thinking, oh, you're against me? How can we work together to bring out the best in this child?
Yes.
For them to thrive.
Even adding to what you're saying, and it's true, because it's like some of the teachers that are teaching these kids are not from the same community.
Exactly.
So
they don't understand.
They don't understand, and it's
From the briars and the shires, as I say.
and it's like they see a certain thing, but if you were supposed to see it, me, you, all of us here, you're able to understand, okay, this is an issue. I understand this experience. I understand why he's feeling like that. And sometimes just because a kid may be quiet, they may not react, doesn't mean they're going through something.
Yeah, it's just, because sometimes that's where the witch hunting comes in and said, okay, a child doesn't look you in the face, maybe they have something to hide. Meanwhile, it's a cultural thing. And that's a lot of things. So when we have more people that we can now collaborate in the school.
Well, they may exaggerate what the child's doing, but it's not really.
Yeah. You know what? It's been an interesting time. I'm going to get your points now, just to round up on discipline. I like the fact that we said what you said about whether it's punitive or is it just corrective or educative. What's your take to finalize this? What is the solution? Where are we going from here?
Well, like, for us to move forward, it's just back to the point of like what asking in terms of like discipline, having it balanced and understanding the kids. And because I'm not a parent, I may just be speaking, but I've never experienced it. But I feel like,
but you've experienced the discipline.
I feel like everyone before taking that step, or even if you're in that step, checking that trauma, and dealing with it. I've seen how it's helped me, how it's helped others, and how that will change the dynamics of how you will see things in the household and in the world. So just dealing with that trauma that has affected you, so you don't affect anyone else.
Yeah, because sometimes it can be so hidden, and it's got to be. I hear you. Thank you so much. And me,
I'll say, what relationship dynamics are you modeling through your discipline?
Thank you so much, Stephen.
Well, in terms of discipline, just to have a process, what is discipline? Check what it means. Do an introspective search on yourself. What you're trying.
Thank you, Amelia.
For me, just to remember that discipline is not supposed to be traumaing, if that's a word. It's supposed to be transformational. It's supposed to be developmental.
Thank you so much, guys, on this episode. And that's what we want to focus on, the fact that discipline doesn't need to have a negative connotation. I think that's what we're trying to say. It's something that we could look at. We need to unlearn, we need to learn, we need to change, we need to listen, and we need to adapt so that our children and us as a people as well, because sometimes we get disciplined, we get, and in the system, in our work and everything, and it's about how do we work together and to see how we can improve our families and our communities. I'll see you next time on Margaret's podcast. Take care.